Confronting Agenda 21, Part 3, produced jointly by Sovereignty International and Freedom 21. There are 3 opportunities to confront Agenda 21: at the visioning stage, at the comprehensive plan stage, and after the plan has been adopted. The further along the process, the harder it is to stop. Let's examine some strategies and tactics for confronting Agenda 21 at each of these stages. Remember, the visioning process is designed to get a handful of citizens to approve and often prioritize a set of predetermined objectives taken directly from Agenda 21, while creating the impression for the media and elected officials that the resulting vision is the product of a broad, diverse section of the grassroots community.
Probably about 61 in the room. So, we ready? So Margot has tabulated the results here. So we're going to drag these around and put them in a list of order from the lowest priority to the highest priority.
Lower carbon, clean air.
Clean air.
Convenient access to jobs.
Convenient access to jobs. So there, according to the votes that we've just rendered, is one look at these priorities.
Note that among the values this facilitator lists, there is no reference to the protection of private property rights, nor is there any reference to the need to assure that public policy is always decided by elected officials, rather than by non-elected appointees. Every plan for the future of every community should have the protection of private property rights at the very top of the priority list of values and goals, as well as the protection of the principle of government empowered by the consent of the governed. You may wish to protect additional values in your community. For example, protection from amortization of non-conforming uses. Remember what's happening in Los Angeles County, where nuisance abatement teams are forcing people off their land because the structures no longer conform to recently adopted building codes? You may wish to include the protection of existing property by guaranteeing that structures will be grandfathered when new building codes are adopted. Equally important is protection from land use restrictions. When the value of private property is diminished as a result of government-imposed land use restrictions, government should compensate the property owner for the loss. This principle is consistent with the Fifth Amendment, regardless of court decisions to the contrary. You may not win this battle at the local level, but if the people demand it, the principle could be included in your local plan. You may think of other values and goals that you want included in the plans for the future of your community. You can quickly see that these values are not consistent with Agenda 21 and will be opposed by your facilitator, or they will be embraced at your meeting but omitted from the final plan. It is imperative that at least the protection of private property be included in every plan for every community. This principle of the value of private property will provide the basis for measuring all of the other values and goals presented by the facilitator. If these goals suggested by the facilitators infringe upon private property rights, then you have a legitimate basis for opposition. If the facilitator refuses to include your values in his list of values and goals, you and your group of informed, prepared citizens may politely shut down the meeting. Do not walk out, or you will lose. But be firm, and do not allow the meeting to proceed until your goals and values are included in his list. Here are some ideas from the East Bay group.
So open space is sort of defined as anything that does not currently have development on it. So it would be defined as agricultural areas or natural areas that don't have urban development on them, either industrial, commercial, or housing.
Government open space, or are you talking about private open space? People's private property, like eminent domain.
It's both.
So what happens to infill?
Like if I had a family farm,
And I mean, I wouldn't want to sell it, but if I did, and I was going to, I don't know, have some ugly, I don't know, like a Walmart or a high-rise, you're saying if it's a high priority to conserve open spaces, we'd want to implement something to where they would discourage me from selling it?
Right. This section is about your priorities.
You want the government to set a priority of controlling how people use their property? Is that what you're saying? Is this what this is all about? About how people use their personal property. So if somebody owns the property, then we're saying that we're voting for the government to be able to take over this person's property.
Okay, folks. I'll respond to these questions, and I'm going to have to move along. This is not a policy setting session. This is about learning about what's important to you. Convenient access to jobs. We had a question, why do we have a picture of light rail there? I think it is probably trying to capture the fact that a lot of job centers are in and around urbanized, and so we didn't mean a whole lot by it, but just try to capture that.
San Jose's light rail system is carrying 0.2% of people who otherwise would have driven. 0.2%. In other words, if you subtract the people out who would have taken the bus, it's negligible. What the effects that it has. Why waste money building that instead of improving the bus service?
Great question. The worksheets that you've got in front of you are for putting all of the kind of comments that you have today. Unfortunately, because we have a fairly packed program, we can't be fielding all of the questions that this would be raising. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move on, but I'm not going to be able to field all of your questions during this segment because we do need to move on and get this session going.
Could you do us a favor? Could you use your comment form?
Learn what it is you're thinking to do. I mean, I don't even understand what's achievable, so I'm just trying to come here to learn. Madam Speaker, if you start at the 30,000-foot level with a vision, and it's not grounded in realities at the bottom, then you're going to end up with answers to your questions that create a false vision that can never be implemented.
Yes.
Defines county. County defines state. Within that process, MTC and ABAC operate at our whim, the citizens. So the local gets to determine that, not MTC and ABAC get to determine what we do.
This was not designed to field all your questions. It wasn't. And for that, I will...
You're asking us to vote on things that we don't agree with.
Then don't vote on them.
You're not giving us a choice to say we don't like any of them.
But, you know, we've been working on this for about 6 to 7 months. And we don't have the prerogative at this moment in time of changing this to suit...
You've been working on 6 or 7 months and you've got a 30,000-foot view and you want us to vote on something that we don't have enough information.
You know, if you feel like this process is not helpful for you, then please write that down on your comment form and tell us what would be. But what I'm saying to you is this is a very packed morning, and we don't have time to field all the questions. We have time to get through this process.
You asked for public input, and we're giving you public input.
The folks at the East Bay visioning session did a good job of frustrating the facilitators by asking valid, relevant questions. Well-prepared group members should attend each of the visioning sessions held throughout your community. One of two things will happen. The facilitators will become frustrated and discontinue or reshape the visioning process, or you will get your values written into the vision. In either case, you win, the facilitators lose, and Agenda 21 is stopped or seriously diminished. When the visioning process is completed, the next step is to create a comprehensive plan. This is the work of the facilitator, or the consulting firm that provides the facilitator. Typically, after several months of preparation, a draft copy of the plan will be released so the consultant can identify points of opposition.
And then 2 drafts were generated. First, there was the April draft released in 2011. I refer to that as a Freudian slip. Now, I say that because it has language that was deleted from the September draft. But that language was of great concern to the Carroll County Board of Commissioners because it demonstrated what we believe to be intent of where the state was going. It talked about the state establishing the highest and best use for all land in the state. It talked about the state aligning and creating transportation plans, housing plans, development plans. It talked about the state getting involved in the production, distribution, and consumption of food, water, and energy. You don't have to be conservative to recognize that those things sound like overreach, and although they have been purged from the recent draft, we're not sure that the intent has disappeared.
Your group should appoint a study committee to analyze the plan and identify all the points of concern, but keep those concerns within the group. No public reaction. Prepare a written analysis of the draft. Make sure that there is adequate provision for the protection of private property rights. If this value is not explicitly stated as a top priority in the plan, make it the first point of your analysis. List other concerns identified by the study group. For example, does the plan assure that existing structures will be grandfathered? Or does it allow adoption of international codes by reference? List every concern succinctly with page number reference. See how Carroll County Commissioner Richard Rothschild makes his point.
But the Plan Maryland is not about going out and trying to take away local land use authority.
One of the premises and one of the things we've heard from the state is that Plan Maryland will not usurp local autonomy. Fact check, false. The enabling legislation, HB 807, on page 1314 states, quote, where there is a conflict with state policies, the state policies shall supersede the local government plan.
When the analysis is complete, a delegation from your group should meet with any friendly elected officials on the board that must approve the plan. The delegation should include people who live in that official's district. It rarely does any good to meet with officials known to support Agenda 21.
1992 was, and I'm sure you know about this, I'll just run through it real quick. 1992 was the Earth Summit, the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, UN, and that was where United Nations Agenda 21 was codified. Now, it was conceptualized in 1976 with the Brundtland Commission.
When this meeting was reported in the Contra Costa Times, the reporter said, "It grew out of a UN program," the speaker said. "It began in 1976 with the Brundtland Commission, which was a commission headed by someone named Brundtland. I don't recall what nation he represented." The article goes on to say, facts are tricky things. We're not trying to discredit the expert, but the Brundtland Commission was formed in 1983, and Brundtland was a she, not a he. Gro Harlem Brundtland, three-term Prime Minister of Norway, when you read her biography, she doesn't seem all that nefarious. The speaker didn't know that the Contra Costa Times was a sponsor of the One Bay Area Planning Initiative.
So I particularly want to thank the Contra Costa Times, who helped fund our initial Shaping the Future effort and has helped us both on its editorial and its news pages to share the word with all of you in our county so that our community members and residents will know what's happening and can come and participate.
A group in Virginia organized their speakers so each speaker read consecutive segments from Sustainable Development or Sustainable Freedom. Each commissioner had been given a copy before the meeting. This tactic assured that the commissioners would at least get a reasonable introduction to the information. These are positive ways to address your locally elected governing body. Quite often, officials will deny that their visioning process or their planning process has any connection with Agenda 21 or with the United Nations. See how the people in Las Cruces, New Mexico, dealt with this problem.
This is from our city clerk. We have searched our files to see if any resolutions have been passed in support of Agenda 21 from the United Nations, and nothing has been passed.
At previous council meetings and in response to recent constituent emails and queries shared with me by members who've emailed the council and the mayor, some of the council members and the mayor have repeatedly denied supporting UN Agenda 21, which adversely impacts our property rights. Members of this council have responded to constituent inquiries and told them that I was mistaken or was misinformed, and the city does not support Agenda 21. As part of the City Council's sustainability program, Las Cruces pays dues to the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, commonly referred to as ICLEI, which is a UN-sanctioned organization. Councilor Sorg, in emails to constituents shared with me, admits that he supports ICLEI. With the exception of perhaps Councilor Thomas, I would imagine the rest of this council has not read the goals or objectives or the mission statement of ICLEI. I'd like to read the following from their mission statement. International goals. Our program and projects promote participatory long-term strategic planning process that addresses local sustainability while protecting global common goods. This approach links local action to internationally agreed upon goals and targets such as, and the very first one is, Agenda 21. The UN Framework and Convention on Climate Change, the UN Convention on Biodiversity, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, the Habitat Agenda, and the list of environmental organizations goes on and on and on. The mayor and this council are either disingenuous or dishonest in their response to public inquiries because the city's membership in ICLEI does by default or intent support Agenda 21. I speak for a lot of people in this city who want the membership in this organization terminated immediately because it is a threat to the American concept of private property. Thank you.
Incidentally, Las Cruces has now canceled their membership with ICLEI. On the day the board is scheduled to consider the plan, fill the boardroom with your members. Be sure everyone is polite and dressed appropriately. A good technique is to have your people sign up to speak. Since speakers from the audience usually only have 2 or 3 minutes, it's a good idea to have the speakers meet well before the board meeting to decide the speaking order and to assign talking points. This can be a powerful tool if coordinated and focused on the issues identified in the analysis. Each speaker should end his presentation by urging the elected officials to vote no on the proposed plan. When the plan has been finalized or adopted, the strategy and tactics change. Focus on how the plan is to be enforced. First, find out what the state requires of the county. It's not that difficult. Go to your favorite search engine and enter your state planning code. You may have to look through a few options, but you can find it. This may be a project for a special study committee. It is important to know what the law requires. It is also important to know whether to focus your efforts on the state legislature or on your local elected officials, or both. Memphis and Shelby County unified their code in 2010. You can find your county or city code on their website, or use your favorite search engine. Be prepared for a huge file. The Memphis Code is 443 pages. You will certainly need a committee to assign the various chapters to look for infringements on property rights and other issues you may want to contest. For example, the Memphis Code requires developers to provide as much as 20% of the property as an open space. The county makes no provision for paying the owner for this space. Is this in keeping with the Fifth Amendment? If this open space is for public use, why should the county not pay for it? There will be many of these issues in your local code. Identify them, organize them, publicize them, and get ready to ask your elected officials to honor the Constitution and change the code. Not all the international codes are adopted by every county or city. Find out which international codes have been adopted in your community. Then get a copy of the codes, especially those which have more to do with social engineering than with public safety. For example, the difference between the International Building Code and the International Green Construction Code is social engineering. Unelected bureaucrats have decided what kind of material you should use in your home, and when adopted by your elected officials, The bureaucrats' ideas about how you should live gain the force of law. Agenda 21 is social engineering, and social engineering results in a government-planned and government-approved society. Agenda 21 and sustainable development has given birth to a new professional planning industry, supported by governments, hundreds of organizations, and advanced degree programs. Professional planning for sustainable development is social engineering, defined in Agenda 21. The World English Dictionary defines social engineering to be the manipulation of the social position and function of individuals in order to manage change in society. Social engineering, as defined by professional planners, assumes that community rights supersede individual property rights. Legitimate planning begins with the recognition of the sanctity of individual private property rights, and limits its planning activity to provide only the protection and services authorized by the people, not by professional planners, visioning councils, nor special interest organizations. Joshua Holland, a left-wing blogger, reflects the attitude held by most professional planners and advocates of sustainable development. He says, Agenda 21 is one of a number of silly but dangerous conspiracy theories sweeping through the fever swamps of the right. Although admittedly sinister sounding, Agenda 21 is just a blueprint for sustainable development. These people can be neither convinced nor converted. They must be outvoted. Local organizations, using accurate information and masterful diplomacy, must educate the community and the elected officials. Those officials who refuse to be educated must be defeated. This is how we can successfully confront Agenda 21.